When I was taken from my birth family, I believe I was 2 years old. What do, if anything, do I remember of the life of my birth family? I remember it all. When I was on the reserve, I remember being taken off reserve. I was with the foster parents. They were Native. It was all Native people. And I never saw a white person until I was actually adopted. And the person that actually adopted, that was the CAS worker, he was white, so he was the first white person I did see. He had a beard and blondish gray hair and a plaid suit. And I remember him coming to visit, and I always wondered who he was, because he didn't look like any of us. And I remember one time they said that I was going somewhere, and I says, well, I don't want to leave. And they says, well, you're going to go someplace, and you'll be okay. And I says, well, I don't want to go. I have a girlfriend, and I pleaded with them that I'm not leaving. And I remember the foster or the CAS worker. He said, you know, would you like to drive my car? And I said, yeah, I'll drive your car. And I got in the car and we drove off, and he let me drive the car on his lap. I remember driving the car, and he says, yeah, here, we'll go for a ride. And I got in the seat there beside him, and that was the last time I saw those people. I was going to the Children's Aid Society to be adopted, which I had no idea that I was being adopted out. And the people that were there were the people that are my foster parents now, which are the Dennises. They were very white, and she had, back then and back in the 70s, I think it was 1970, she had Dolly Parton hair and very blonde and big. And I remember as a little child, the lights were hitting her hair from behind, and it would radiate. It was blonde, it was gold, and I thought she was an angel. Because I used to go to church and I used to see all the Bibles, and they had little angels in the scriptures and stuff, and there would be yellow hair, and I thought that was an angel. I was pretty excited at that time to, that I was going, and they had kids too, and I remember playing with the kids around, going around corners and in the hallways, and I thought that was pretty neat. They were very white. I'd never seen such white people before, but, and that was okay. It seemed really quite all right. Things kind of shift. I don't remember specifics, but I know we moved. I was going to Peterborough, and it's funny. Peterborough is where I spent my first years with the Dennises, and he was a minister, and well known in his church community as a minister, and also a mechanic, I believe. He was very cold. He didn't, I just didn't really know how to act as a child when you don't feel like they're your parents. And I was told that I'm your mom and dad now, and I couldn't get past that. How can you be my mom and dad? And I remember, and I didn't know what to call them, because I didn't feel comfortable calling. And I would hear her call him Gord, and that's his name, is Gord. And I used to call, go get your dad, eh? And I'd call him Gord, Gord, Gord. And I didn't realize that was not a good thing to do, because he hit me in the back of the head. He says, what's my name? I said, Gord. Then he yelled at me. He says, what is my name? I said, it's Gord. And he'd hit me again. He says, say it again. What am I? And I realized that, I remembered that I was supposed to call him Dad. And And so I said, "Your dad." And I remember walking down the hill crying. And I lived in fear from that moment on. There was a lot of abuse in the family. I had a brother and a sister that were close to my age. And so I knew them more because there were two older brothers and sister, but they weren't around much, eh? But I was closer to the younger two, which I had an older brother and a younger sister. And I used to live with a lot of shame and guilt with them. That the sister would always say, "I wish we never adopted you. You're not my brother, eh?" And then she would, I guess in some ways that'd be some kind of controlling thing to do. Things got a little out of hand there. I experienced sexual abuse with this family. It wasn't with the parents, it was with the brothers and sisters. They were doing things that I didn't know you're supposed to, I had no, it was wrong. And you know that it's wrong. And yet I felt really subject, I had to do it. And if I didn't do it, my brother would beat me up. And I don't understand why he would beat me up and you know what, I'm crying and he would laugh at me. I was grateful to hear from them. It made me feel like I wasn't alone, even though I felt alone. I used to hide under the bed when they would tell me that your father's coming home and he's going to hear about this. And I would be under the bed shaking and hoping that he wouldn't find me, and they would always find me. So I found a new place. I would hide myself in the log pile. I'd pile logs on top of myself so they couldn't find me. And this is a family that's a minister's family. And I used to go to church and I'd hear them say, "Oh, they're the perfect family." And I'm thinking, how can that be? It's like, do you not see what's happening? And it's like, I always dreamed and hoped that my real mom and dad would come and get me. And I waited. And I waited for them. Think that they'll come and grab me and say, we miss you and we love you. We want you back. That didn't happen. I was really most happiest with the last people that I was with, and they were really wonderful people. They provided, they took me to powwows. I brought my bow with me, and he carved that. When I first went to my first powwow, I was so enthralled, and it was just so beautiful because I didn't know how to dance, but it was almost like when I was there, it was like a celebration of ourselves. Like we were celebrating who we were. And I remember I felt so proud in that moment to be who I was. And I saw this one dancer, he was dancing with his bow and arrow, and it was like he was shot something when he was dancing, and you could see he was walking around dancing in a circle like he was crying, like he was pleading to something on the ground. And I kept wondering, what's he doing, eh? And it realized to me, and it wasn't until years later I realized that had such impact on me, that he was dancing for the prey that he was shooting, that he was asking for forgiveness for killing that animal. And I remember him looking up and pleading and hitting his heart like this with the beat and asking for forgiveness. and thanking the Creator. And then he would dance with joy. And I thought, why is he dancing with joy? And I realized that he was dancing with joy because the animal gave his spirit up so his family could eat. And I was so empowered by that moment that I said to my foster father, I says, I want a bow. And he carved me a bow within that week. And that's the bow that I have here. It's been with me for 46 years. And it's a little kid's bow, but it's a great little bow, and I've had it, and I carry it with my medicines. 8 years of my life in and out of institutions, some in straitjackets, and but most of them in behind bars. I became an addict, an alcoholic. I drank a lot, and alcohol seemed to have a ability to make me feel better about myself, and also the ability to not care about what others were thinking. And so it was kind of a medicine that way for me. Not saying it was the right medicine, but it was the thing that I needed to get through life. I drank extensively all the time. And it got so bad that it was an everyday thing that I had to drink. And I also discovered drugs too. I was doing drugs at 13 years old, drinking at 10, and drugs were pretty cool. And the thing that when I was doing smoking, marijuana, it actually kind of led me to other drugs. I wanted to, because I was in so much pain, it was easier for me to be drugged up or alcoholed up than it was for me to live in the reality of being straight. The pain was so great that I could not handle it. And I tried to kill myself even not being straight. And it was hard. I had no courage. So I thought having alcohol and drugs gave me courage, but it didn't give me the courage to kill myself. It gave me courage to actually keep on living and not care because my mind was being numbed out. And so I was able to do that for a lot of years. When I didn't have enough, when I came to a bottom, I've gone to many bottoms. And every time I come to a bottom and I couldn't have any money, I didn't have money, I would actually I would break into an industrial or into a house, throw a rock in just so I could get caught by the police and they could take me to jail. So I could get sober and get cleaned up and feel good about myself again. And I knew when I was going to leave that place, I'd go back out and do it all over again. I like to say that my life was better after that. It certainly wasn't. It got worse. I continued to go in and out of institutions. I lived with shame with that. I lived shame with my family. I lived with shame with my people of who I was. And even when I did go into places where there were Native people, they would call me an apple because I had so much white in me. And even though I'm brown on the outside, they would, "You're an apple." I go, "What is that?" "You're red on the outside, but you're white on the inside." And so I felt shame for that too, and I didn't know who I was. It wasn't until later in my life, when I became a young adult, that I was able to stand up for myself and find courage to go into, I went to Guelph Correctional Center, and they had sweat lodges there, and that's where I really discovered the sweat lodge. And that's when I really found out who I was. And that's when I found out that my people are a great people. And I became so proud of who I was that I became an extremist. The pendulum swung from one end to the other end, and I thought we were the superior race. So I ended up really not being a proper Native at that point. But I needed to be that extreme in order to stand strong for who I was. And I had to leach out the Christianity doctrine that was indoctrinated in me, because I lived with guilt and shame that I was going to hell. I found a book in the archives about Sitting Bull. And I read that book, and I was so appalled by what happened to our people. And that's when I became really extreme. So I found myself. And when I started going into the sweat lodges, that's where the pendulum kind of to be more balanced, and I realized that's not what it was. And I remember the sweat lodge being so hard for me. It was such a hard experience to get through it. It took me 5 times to go through that sweat lodge before I could make it through one sweat lodge. And by the time I made it through that one sweat lodge, I remember coming out of there, and I stood up, and I remember the lodge was there, and the grounds were there, and there was like some posts, and I remember as we were standing outside of the lodge, and I looked up in the sky. It was sunny. It was a blue sky, except for this one cloud going across the sky, and it was going pretty quick. And I saw it, and I looked up, and I breathed for the first time in my life. I says, I belong to this earth, and this earth belongs to me. I know who I am. And that cloud, my given name is Bi-Giwen, which means fast-moving cloud. And I said, I'm fast-moving cloud. And that's when I knew who I was. And that's when I kept going towards who I was. I had my only cultural remembrance is what I had on the reserve when I was 6 years old. And in jail, when they had powwows, they would bring the native teachers in, and the powwows in there. And that was wonderful. You know, I'm grateful for that. I'm really grateful. A person shouldn't be grateful to find their culture in jail, but I am actually. And it reconnected me, and it's a lot of our warriors are in institutions right now, and they need to be brought home as well. I was 25 when I found my mother. I knew which reserve I was from because the status stayed with me when I got adopted. And I found her, and it was really, I was excited, hey. I had, unfortunately I had expectations, and you shouldn't have expectations because they'll let you down every time. I was hoping for something greater and grander, and I didn't get that. Not at first. I didn't realize my mother was a victim of adoption causes too, eh? She was told when she had us that she was encouraged to give the kids up for adoption. Just as soon as she had it, will you put your kids up for adoption? It's like, so I could tell when I talked to her, because she would look like cut marks all along her arms, eh? And that kind of freaked me out, and I was afraid. So I ran away from that. And it wasn't until 10 years later that I actually, I have a good relationship with her today, and she's in the program. She's clean. She's been 50 years clean, alcohol-free, but we have a good relationship. She shares with me what it was like for her as a mother back then, and it was pretty hard for her too. This adoption didn't only affect the children; it affected the parents and the mothers that had to give up their children. It was not a good time. And I also found my brothers. Two of them are are not on a good path today. One is on a good path. I have a good relationship with him. The other two I don't, because it doesn't coincide with my living today. Our studies need to make clear that this 60 scoop happened. I was grateful when I heard the boarding school children got their settlement, and at the same time I was thinking, what about us? I remember when I was in the institution, I was still in jail when the Royal Commission happened, and I sat at the table with Ovid McCurdy and Rennie Dussault and Bertha Wilson. I remember sitting, eating lunch with them when they says, what's your story, Chris? What would you like us to tell us? And I said to them, I'm adopted. I've lost who I am, and I'm here now because the only reason I'm here now is because I'm found Native sons in jail that have connected me with my culture, eh? But I've spent years not knowing who I was and hating myself.